Hey guys, welcome back to Sky Talks Books. My name is Sky, and this is my May reading wrap-up. It was a weird month. I say that every month, but a real mix. We got, of course, literary fiction, contemporary fiction. We've also got a fair bit of non-fiction, more than usual. We got some poetry, some fantasy, yeah, some YA fantasy, a thriller. So yeah, I think we've got quite a lot to get through. At the end, I sort of want to talk about the books that I DNF'd this month, because there was a lot of books that I DNF'd, more than usual. Let's start with the books that I read physical copies of, and then we'll go on to the ones that I read ebook versions. So let's start with some classics. I read Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton, and I binged this in a day, and I absolutely loved it. This is very tragic and very moving. It's about loneliness, and it's about loneliness like made worse by the setting that you're living in and by the season that you're living in or through, and it's about longing, and it's about feeling trapped in a situation. There's a scene in this that will stay with me forever. The pickle jar scene. Like, I've never felt so much anguish over a pickle jar. If you've read this, you'll know what I mean. So yeah, 5-star read. Definitely gonna be reading more Edith Wharton. Next, we have another classic. We have The Fox by D.H. Lawrence. I love Lawrence. I think he's underappreciated, underrated, and that is a controversial opinion, depending who you speak to, I guess. I actually watched a documentary on D.H. Lawrence and why he was so hated. I mean, he's got a lot of banned books and it was very controversial, but also he lived in this little village, and he wrote about the people that lived in the village, and he didn't bother changing the names. So yeah, he caused quite a stir, but that is iconic, I think. So The Fox, absolutely loved this. You guys know that I love books that can be read through lots of different lenses. The lens that I immediately kind of gravitated towards and picked up on was gender norms. Okay, sorry, I just realized my hair was kind of a bit of a mess. It's just one of those days, guys. This is about two women, and they own a farm, and one is kind of more delicate and fragile. She's kind of the brains behind the operation, I guess, and the other is the brawn. She is a lot more, you know, as they say, she's in this book, she's the man about the place. And they love each other very deeply. Now, listen, it's not explicitly said anywhere that they are a couple. They might actually just be gal pals. And yeah, there's this fox. Obviously there's a fox that features in it. It's more of a symbol. I also love D.H. Lawrence because he uses like extended motifs and metaphors. And this young guy comes in and he sort of shakes things up. That's all I'm gonna say. Next, taking a little turn, I read It Came From Ohio, My Life as a Writer. And this is the kind of the life story autobiography of R.L. Stine. Now, it's written for grade schoolers, as the Americans say, so kids. But this was just delightful. I loved it. It was actually very inspiring. Like, I think anyone, no matter what age, like if you want to be a writer, or if you want to like pursue any dream, you should read this book. Yeah, it's funny, and it's got, you know, got pictures of like his early like comic books and magazines that he made as a kid. This was a nice palette cleanser between like classics and non-fiction. Another kind of palette cleanser. I swear we're gonna get some more like serious books. Flip that, you know? I don't like people who are literary snobs or gatekeep reading in any way, but we are gonna get to more serious books. But for now, we're gonna talk about The Picture of Dorian Greyhound. This is from the Classic Tales collection, and it's classics retold with illustrations, and it's, I mean, you know, with dogs. This one is dogs. This is greyhounds. This was actually really good. Okay? And it's really funny because there was times where I forgot they were dogs, and then there'd be like this little detail of like when they would meet someone new, they would sniff each other's hind legs, and it's like, yeah, they're dogs. So yeah, highly recommend. Next we have Animal Farm. I did a whole reading vlog about reading this book. Maybe it's up already. If it is, I'll link it in a card. It pained me to give this book 2 stars. I didn't have an enjoyable time reading it. I just found it way too oversimplistic, dull, I just wasn't absorbed in it. It was just like, I just couldn't connect with it. I just like my allegories to have a little bit more meat, a little bit more nuance. We have this another delightful book, The Treasured Tales from Beatrix Potter. And this has 4 tales in it. So I was reading this over like the course of like a few months. It was kind of one of those books that I was grazing, so to speak. I would just leave it next to my bedside. Just lovely illustrations, and the writing is quite odd. It's quite like, takes a while to get into. There's also a lot of like, low-key a lot of child abuse. Like, they were not afraid to hit their young, is all I'm gonna say. Let's talk about my favorite book of the month. I think my favorite, definitely one of my favorites. Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. This is the same author who wrote The Pisces, which is my favorite book. And just like The Pisces, it is honest, it is fresh, it is bold. It's not afraid to go places. So while The Pisces was more an examination of depression, Milk Fed is more of an examination about eating disorders. So yeah, the main protagonist, the narrator, she has an eating disorder. This with a lot of important themes, you know, eating disorders, toxic family relationships, queer desire, religion. I learned a lot about the Jewish religion actually from reading this book, so that was pretty cool. Next, I'm going to talk about Perfume. This was kind of a buddy read. Well, my friend read it and she was like, oh, you should read this book. It was Kurt Cobain's favorite book and that's why she read it. So yeah, Perfume, the story of a murderer, I think is the full name. So this is about a guy who, he has a very strong sense of smell, let's say. In fact, you know, he may as well just be one giant nose. And he is on a quest to make, you know, the most amazing perfume in the world. And how he does that, he uses some interesting technique. He murders people, he murders women. It's deeply disturbing, very, very descriptive, very atmospheric. It actually sort of gave me a dark academia feel. I know, take a shot every time I say that a book gave me a dark academia feel, but it did. The only thing that stopped this from being like a, you know, like a 4 or 5 star read for me was I felt very disconnected from the main character. I really didn't feel any emotional connection. Okay, next I read a book of essays, which is, you know, a new genre for me. I read Upstream by Mary Oliver. So this is a book of essays about writing, about writers, and about nature. Mainly about nature, I would say. And I really enjoyed the parts about writing and creativity. And some of the parts about nature, when she started like kissing her lactating cat, is where I was kind of like, this is a little bit too much for me. Like she really took tree hugging to a whole new level. I love nature, okay, in the countryside. I grew up in the countryside. I like being in nature and looking at paintings and photographs of nature. But do I enjoy reading in-depth, minuscule descriptions for pages and pages about like reeds and ponds? No, I don't. So this book wasn't for me. And then there's essays. There's one essay on Poe, one on Emerson, and one on Whitman. I kind of skipped most of that, to be honest. I did learn that Poe was a bit of a creep. Are we surprised? Now we're getting into some non-fiction. I read The Professor and the Madman, and listen, this is like, if you're looking for dark academia non-fiction, this is your place to go. It was incredible. It was a story of how the Oxford Dictionary was written. It's absolutely perfect for anyone who is a lover of linguistics, writing, literature. There was so many different sort of Easter eggs about different authors and inspirations for famous books and stuff. It was honestly super, super fascinating. And I highly recommend it. I also read The Soul of an Octopus, which I was really looking forward to, which is narrative nonfiction. Look, I enjoyed parts of it. I did. It's about octopuses and, you know, how amazing they are and how smart they are and stuff. But it was just a bit dull and repetitive, like, and there was a bit too narrative, a bit too focused on the woman who was writing its life. Sorry, I wasn't that interested in reading about chapters about like her learning to scuba dive. So yeah, it was a bit disappointing for me. Getting into some weird fiction, Earthlings. This is by the same author as The Convenience Store Woman, which is just so bizarre to me. They do have similar themes about like societal pressure and breaking away from society and stuff. Other than that, these books could not be more different. Nothing prepared me for this book. Even though, I read reviews and they were like, wow, this book is absolutely crazy. It deals with very heavy themes, but it's written in a very simplistic, straightforward way, because it's written through the eyes of a kid, this little girl, who has this toy hedgehog who gives her special powers, and she believes that she is an alien from outer space. It is very shocking and absurd. The last half of the book just like throws you for a loop. But I mean, it was amazing. 4.5. I'm gonna give it a 4.5. Okay, if you plan on reading this book, afterwards go and watch the movie Mysterious Skins with Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it, and compare them in your mind. You don't have to. Why am I giving you homework assignments? Okay, I also read some poetry, a narrative poem, Goblin Market. I talk more in depth about that in my video, 8 Classics for Beginners. So if you want a full, more in-depth analysis and look at that, honestly, I think it's a good video anyway, so you should probably watch it. But just on a personal note, I love goblins, so this was perfect for me. Next, I read Tin Man. I love this cover. It is a story that like unfolds and unfurls and paints this tender and poignant portrait of friendship and love and grief and longing, and no, it was very like cozy yet heartbreaking, which is like weird. So it like makes you feel like all the ooey gooey, homely, cozy feelings, and then it smashes your heart into like smithereens, and then it like puts it back together, and and it's just like on a loop like that. So if you're a fan of ekphrasis, which is the use of detailed description of a work of visual art as a literary device, you'll really like this book, because there is a lot of descriptions of famous paintings, mostly Van Gogh. Next was another buddy read, actually. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga. I'm really, really bad at pronouncing names. Yeah, this was quite frankly a masterpiece. It was. I adored this book, I really did. It's about an eccentric older lady. I don't want to say too much about it, honestly, because I went into it blind, and I think it's a really good book to go into blind. This was one of those books that if I highlighted books, I would have highlighted the whole thing, but yeah, I was just taking notes all the way through. There was so many profound, beautiful parts in it. And let's just say I definitely understand why she won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Next, I read Josie and Jack, which was honestly awful. It was such a good premise. It's about this brother and sister who are like, they're like this, and they're homeschooled all their life, and they live in this big mansion pretty much on their own. They kind of have to fend for themselves. Their mother left them, and the dad is like an alcoholic professor who just like forced them to learn Latin at like 6 years old. And they just kind of spend all the time like doing drugs and listening to Wagner. It was such a good premise. Like, I was really excited for it. In the first quarter of the book, I really enjoyed it. And then it just went like meandering, dull. Honestly, I think the problem here was it was a first draft. This book needed editing a lot. Someone needed to sit down with the author and be like, you need to kill your darlings. Slaughter them, because there's too many. To be fair, I think it was YA, and maybe for like young people, like teenagers, maybe like reading about attractive people just drinking whiskey and stuff every night is enough for them. Honestly, it was just bad. It was just bad. It almost put me in a reading slump. Next, I read Flowers for Algernon, which absolutely amazing. This has been on my TBR for so long, but I was just never in the mood, and I'm so happy I finally got around to it. It's about this guy who is severely intellectually challenged, he has severe learning disability, and he undergoes an experiment to make him smarter. And it's all written through, or to make him a genius really, and it's all written through his like journal entries for the experiment, like progress reports. And so obviously the first part of it is like the spelling is terrible. It reads like a 6-year-old's diary. And then like this book is like a masterclass in tone, because slowly and you can't even really like pinpoint what it is that is changing, but you can feel him getting smarter. You can read and experience him getting smarter slowly and slowly, and it's so subtle. Yeah, it's a heartbreaking book. It's very bingeable. I couldn't put it down. 5 stars. Next, I read a nice short little novella called We the Animals. It's about these 3 brothers, and it's written in these like little vignettes, and it's about these 3 brothers, like as they grow up, and you know they're scallywags, for want of a better word. You know, they're rough and tumbling brothers, and you know, living in poverty with their parents, you know, going through all sorts of stuff, abusive father. So it looks at domestic abuse, but mainly it just looks at the relationship between brothers, and I find it such a fascinating. I was just obsessed with the relationship between these 3 brothers, and it was like very beautiful and poignant. So yeah, if you're looking for a short but powerful book that you can like read in a day, I definitely recommend We the Animals. Next, I took a little foray into fantasy. Yeah, I saw this book on TikTok that is being described as The Great Gatsby, but with sapphic witches. And listen, say no more. Like, yeah, I'm gonna read it. And yeah, honestly, that describes it perfectly. I loved this book. I loved the love story, the witchiness, the dark academia vibes, and the found family element as well. So that's something I'm also really love in books, found family. I will say that the Great Gatsby, some of the Great Gatsby nods are a little bit too on the nose for my liking, but still, you know, I loved it. Yeah, I was very immersed in it, like just pure escapism. I'm definitely gonna read more fantasy. I think this was YA, I'm not sure. And lastly, I explored another new genre that I've never read before, and that is thrillers. I read Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, and wowie. Wow. What's that thing when you're on the edge of your seat? Cliffhanger. There was like cliffhangers at the end of every chapter pretty much. So yeah, in my last reading wrap-up, I talked about reading her short story, The Grown Up, and how I need to read her others, and I did it. Wow, me doing something I said I'm gonna do. That's very rare. And now I'm saying I need to read Sharp Objects and Gone Girl, even though I'm actually rewatching Sharp Objects right now, the HBO adaptation, because it's just absolutely amazing. So yeah, I said I was gonna talk about the books that I DNF'd, but I am losing my voice. So we'll talk about that another time. Maybe I'll do like a whole video on like all the books that I DNF'd this year. That could be fun. But for now, I'm gonna say goodbye. Willow, do you want to say goodbye, honey? Oh, you're kind of busy, are you? Want to say goodbye? Great. Okay.